There is a version of this story that everyone knows. It's the story of May. 1911. The United States Supreme Court handed down the ultimate punishment to the Standard Oil Company. They ordered the monopoly to be dissolved, torn into 34 separate pieces. The newspapers declared it a monumental victory for the public. They said John D. Rockefeller's empire had been destroyed. And yet, this defeat was exactly what made him the richest man in human history. The combined value of those fractured companies didn't collapse. It skyrocketed. He didn't lose his empire. He multiplied it. This is not a story about how to build an empire, but how to make it completely invisible. To understand how you hide a fortune, you first have to understand the man who built it. He didn't learn business in a boardroom. He learned it from a con man. His father, William Rockefeller, known to everyone as Devil Bill, was a bigamist. He lived a double life, traveling the countryside selling snake oil and fake cures for cancer. Bill didn't believe in coddling his children. He once loaned his young son, John, $1,000 to start a business. At 10% interest, Devil Bill proudly told neighbors that he cheated his boys every chance he got. He wanted to keep them sharp. He wanted to teach them that the world was entirely composed of predators and prey. It worked. Maybe too well. John D. Rockefeller took that lesson and applied it to the chaotic, cutthroat world of oil refining. By 1872, the city of Cleveland belonged to him. The rest of the country was next. He executed a hostile takeover that history now calls the Cleveland Massacre. Within a span of mere weeks, his company, Standard Oil, bought out or completely crushed 22 of its 26 rivals in the city. He would invite competitors to secret meetings. He would show them his books, revealing shipping rates so low they defied logic. Then he offered them a choice. Sell your life's work to me at my price, or be driven into total bankruptcy. There was no middle ground. No mercy. The exact details of every backroom threat are lost to history. But what we do know is that his ruthless calculation wasn't just about money. It was about absolute, unquestioned control. But this level of dominance comes at a cost. They didn't just break the competition. They broke the public. And then came April 1914. The Ludlow Massacre. Coal miners in Colorado went on strike against a Rockefeller-backed mining company. They were demanding basic human rights, better pay, safer conditions. The response wasn't a negotiation. It was the National Guard, armed with machine guns. Gunfire ripped through the striking miners' camp. Tents were set ablaze. When the smoke finally cleared over the frozen mud, 21 people were dead. Among the victims were 2 women and 11 children, suffocated in a dirt pit beneath a burning tent where they had huddled for safety. I need to stop here for a second. The public hatred for the Rockefeller family reached a fever pitch. Protesters marched outside their offices. They were the most despised people in America. Threats of violence, of open revolution, hung in the air like ash. He had built a machine that printed money. But that same machine was about to paint a massive target on his back. They had all the money in the world, but they were about to lose the one thing they couldn't buy. Survival. The government thought they had the answer. They thought they could slay the dragon. In 1911, the Supreme Court of the United States handed down the ultimate punishment. Standard Oil was declared an illegal monopoly. It had to die. The company was ordered to be broken up into 34 independent entities. Today, you know them as ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Amoco. The newspapers declared the monopoly dead. The public celebrated the fall of the tyrant. The government handed down the ultimate punishment. But it was exactly what he wanted. They missed the fine print. When the court shattered Standard Oil, John D. Rockefeller retained a massive 25% stake in every single one of those 34 new companies. And the timing was impeccable. The dawn of the automobile age had arrived. The demand for gasoline exploded. Freed from the sheer, lumbering size of the monopoly, the newly independent companies became incredibly agile and ruthlessly competitive. The value of the severed parts grew far beyond the value of the original whole. He didn't lose his empire. He multiplied it by 34. And look, this part is hard to believe. While the public cheered his downfall, while politicians took victory laps in Washington, Rockefeller quietly became the first billionaire in the history of the world. His net worth surged to an estimated 2% of the entire United States economy. He was playing a game no one else even understood. The government had tried to crush him, and instead, they had crowned him. But wealth of that magnitude is a dangerous thing. It attracts predators. It attracts taxes. It attracts ruin. He was now the wealthiest man in human history. But holding on to that wealth, ensuring it survived past his own lifetime, would require a level of secrecy the world had never seen. November 1910. A private train car waits in the darkness at a station in Hoboken, New Jersey. Destination: Jekyll Island, Georgia. The men boarding the train are given strict instructions. No last names allowed, only first names. Senator Nelson Aldrich, whose daughter was married to John D. Rockefeller Jr., gathered the most powerful financial minds in the country. Men like Frank Vanderlip. They met in absolute secrecy at an exclusive hunting club to draft what would become the Federal Reserve Act. The family wasn't just playing the game anymore. They were writing the rules of American capitalism. They were deeply intertwining their own interests with the national money supply. But their true masterpiece wasn't the banking system. It was the trusts. They gave away millions in public, while locking billions in the dark. To protect the money from the government, they had to legally own none of it. In 1934, and again in 1952, the family pioneered a radical legal structure. They decoupled ownership from control. They created an impenetrable, labyrinthine matrix of family trusts. They donated astronomical sums to philanthropic foundations, universities, hospitals, the United Nations. It looked like the ultimate act of generosity. But it served a dual purpose. It allowed them to dodge crippling estate taxes, while the family still maintained voting rights and control over the massive assets held within those foundations. The architecture of their wealth preservation was flawless. It was explicitly designed to avoid the third-generation curse, the inevitable moment when heirs grow soft and squander the fortune. They had built a shadow system, hiding their true net worth from the IRS, the media, and the public. And it worked. They were untouchable. The trusts were bulletproof against the government, but they offered no protection against the jungle. "10 miles from shore, a catamaran overturns, and an heir vanishes. 1961. 23-year-old Michael Rockefeller, the great-grandson of the founder, was on an expedition in the remote jungles of New Guinea. When their overloaded boat capsized in rough waters, Michael tied 2 empty gasoline cans to his waist and told his companion, "I think I can make it." He swam for the distant shore. He was never seen again. There are 2 versions of this story. One is that he simply drowned, exhausted by the relentless tide. The other, the one that keeps showing up in local legends and investigative reports, involves rumors of a brutal end at the hands of the Asmat tribe, whispers of cannibalism. No one really knows what happened in that water. But the profound contrast is staggering. The absolute power of the Rockefeller dynasty, a machine that could bend nations to its will, was completely powerless to save a young man in the mud of New Guinea. Infinite wealth couldn't buy survival. The illusion of their absolute control began to crack. 1974. Washington demands the truth about the fortune. Nelson Rockefeller was nominated for Vice President of the United States. It forced a public confirmation hearing. For the first time in history, the family's finances were dragged into the glaring light of a congressional committee. Nelson sat before the microphones and claimed his personal net worth was a modest $218 million. But financial journalists had estimated the family secretly controlled over $10 billion. How do you hide $10 billion? Their chief financial advisor, J. Richardson Dilworth, sat before Congress and deployed a weapon of mass confusion. He presented charts so complex, so deliberately convoluted, with so many interlocking trusts and holding companies, that no one in the room could follow them. The charts were confusing. That was the point. They claimed to be just modest investors, a myth of fading relevance. Meanwhile, their secretive family office, Venrock, was quietly funding the creation of an entirely new empire, Silicon Valley. They were early investors in companies like Apple and Intel. They maintained a phantom grip on global capitalism. They had learned the final, most important lesson of power. If people can see your wealth, they can take it. They can tax it. They can destroy it. But if they can't see it, it lasts forever. John D. Rockefeller started with nothing but a 10% loan from a conman. He built the most visible, hated monopoly on earth. And then, piece by piece, his descendants erased it from public view. They walked away from the light and into the shadows. The greatest trick they ever pulled wasn't making billions. It was convincing the world they had given it all away.